My mother told me growing up that I had to be dead silent while she was baking or the cake's cookies would be ruined. My wife just looked at me like I was insane when I shushed her while she put her cake in the oven. Reddit. In what ways has your stupidity been brilliantly manipulated? We can't go to McDonald's. It's closed. Never questioned it. As a child I just thought McDonald's had a horrible business model being closed all the time. Then you find out some of them never close. D. My whole life, every 6 months to a year, the skin on my feet cracks and peels. In order to explain it and make sure I wasn't self-conscious about it, my mom told me that it happened because my feet were growing. It was only a couple years ago that I realized my feet haven't grown in a long time, but the skin still peels. My mom still laughs about it. When I was a kid, my best friend, Black, told me that white people shed their skin in the shower. Now I know how that rumor started. When I couldn't sleep, my mother would give me sleeping potion, a dab on the nose, sniff it and I would fall asleep. Once, when I was about 16 or 17 I couldn't sleep, so I asked my mom if she could give me some of that stuff she did when I was a kid. It was perfume, you idiot. My mom had a special drink she would make me when I couldn't sleep. It was hot chocolate with something else in it, and even now that I am an adult and living on my own she will not tell me what it was. I have no idea if she was duping me or actually drugging me. When my brother, sister, and I were little, we played a game where every time my mom or dad would yell statue, usually in a moment when we were being particularly rowdy, we'd all freeze in place. The first person to crack lost the game. We loved the crap out of that game. I think one time we were locked in an epic statue battle for close to an hour. It took me until I was about 14 to figure out this was an extremely clever way to make children stfu. When I was a camp counselor, I'd use it on my kids all the time. Genius. Mom and dad. Genius. I had many a teacher in primary school play sleeping lions. You lay on the floor, pretend to be a sleeping lion. If you talked or moved, you lost. Everyone loved that game. When I was a toddler, my mom told me that certain toys had to stay in the playpen, so I would actually ask to be put in the playpen and would never fuss about it. I was not the brightest crayon in the box. That is brilliant. My parents told me that chocolate milk came from brown cows. I had no reason not to believe them. When I was 5, a teacher rhetorically asked the class if chocolate milk came from brown cows. Everyone screamed out at the same time. Class, no, oh. Me, yes. Turns out, my parents are freaking liars. But seriously, my mom would put food coloring in our milk gallons and tell me she met a green or blue or red or yellow cow on the way home from work. My parents used to tell us when we were lying a star appeared on our forehead so they knew when we were fibbing. So when we lied, we covered our foreheads, and that's how they really knew that we were lying. Brilliant, and pathetic that it actually worked on me and my sisters. When my sisters and I were kids, my mom hid the remote for the garage door where we couldn't see her pushing the button. She convinced us that the door wouldn't open or close unless we said please and thank you. We grew up to be very polite. I've taught my 4-year-old that the automatic sliding door on my minivan would open if he says open sesame. Yup, he believes it. Of course the door on the other side of the van opens to open Saskatchewan. If I don't reach the remote in time to open it he just yells louder. My dad told me that special dark Hershey's were for dads only, and on Halloween he would make me go through my candy to give him all of them. My mother told me that if the car door were ever open while the car was moving, I remember vividly, sucked right out of the door. I marveled for years about how exactly a vortex would be formed, eventually trying to gather some empirical data and scaring the crap out of my mom. This was before child locks were a thing. Get off my lawn. I was told the same thing, but with the added the door must be locked at all times because if it's not the latch could just come undone and fling the door open. I'm 32. I still lock the doors when I drive, just in case. My mom told me the wheels of a car couldn't move until every seatbelt had been buckled, that there was literally a mechanism preventing the wheels from rotating till everyone buckled. I believed this for 24 years. You bet I'll tell my children the same thing. I drove a stick pickup in high school and convinced all my friends that it wouldn't start unless they fastened their seatbelt. I would turn the key without engaging the clutch and it would not, of course, turn over. Then they'd click and I'd press the clutch, and voila, ignition. I was always told to eat my crusts or my hair wouldn't go curly. I don't know why I would have wanted curly hair, but now I have got curly hair. Stupid crusts. My grandpa told me if I didn't eat crusts I wouldn't be able to whistle. I really wanted to whistle. My dad told me and my brother that if we don't crouch in the elevators our weenies would fall off. We even warned our friends about it. Yeah, he said it was so we wouldn't accidentally press any buttons. Amazing. When I was a kid my mother would occasionally make mac and cheese. I thought I was an awesome little chef and wanted to help with everything when in reality I was just getting in the way. It made her nervous what with the boiling water and all. So she would give me the cheese packet, not the powdery kind, the gross but oh so delicious cheese goo and tell me it needed mixing. I would sit on a stool in the kitchen for like 10 minutes poking at this little bag of cheese to mix it up. I did this last summer when I was making it for myself. I'm 20, and my mother saw when she passed through the kitchen and busted out laughing. I was just sitting on the stool, diligently kneading cheese. I felt like a bit of a moron when she explained her laughter. You'd think I would have noticed that it wasn't on the directions. I was reading through this thread, going wow, a lot of people's parents lied to them. I'm glad my mom was always pretty truthful with me. Then I got to this comment. I still need the dang cheese and anything else squishy that comes in a packet. My parents told us that the emergency room was closed on the weekends. Around 5 PM on a Friday my mom would say, "Don't you get hurt or you'll bleed to death by Monday." We believed it until I was around 11 because we never had to go to the ER. Probably because the fear of death made us extra careful. When I was babysitting in high school, I told the 8-year-old boy and his buddy not to get hurt on their trampoline. He replied, "If we get hurt, you're supposed to take us to the hospital," like I was the dumbest person he met. I quickly replied, "Well, I don't know where the hospital is," and his little friend looked scared and said, "Okay, we won't get hurt." You know the knots on trees? My parents told my younger brother and I they were tree turtles. Essentially the flying red turtles from Mario games. We were young and our dad worked as an arborist so we assumed it was real. They used to freak us out when we'd go in the forest or go on a hike saying, "Oh look, one has hatched over here," one day culminating in my little brother running out of the woods screaming and crying because he thought he heard one coming. The turtles were supposedly aggressive and would bite you. Our dad had a big scar on his arm from a chainsaw accident and he would tell us it was from a tree turtle attack while working. The fricked up part about all this is eventually they figured they should stop fricking with us like this since my brother was getting so scared. But they never told us. So when I was about 14-15 years old it just popped into my head one day. One of those things your brain randomly plucks from years and years ago. Hey, wait a sec. There's no such thing as fricking tree turtles, thanks parents. When going over someone's house for dinner, my mom and dad would tell me and my sister these people really don't like kids. They used to have kids and they hated them. My sister and I were angels. We were always complimented with how well behaved we were. We were just really terrified. I'm not sure of what, but we behaved. Years later my sister asked why so many people don't like kids and it made me think of how nobody liked kids, the population would shrink. I'm telling the same bulls to my kids. If I survived so will they. My god, this was the exact same method my parents used. Genius. My dad did these things for no reason other than to wind me up. He used to throw tiny pebbles at the top of my head every now and again when we were walking to school or whatever, and when I asked what it was, "Thunderbolt," came the response. I thought for many years I was lucky to have not been hit by lightning. The best was this ridiculous thing he did. So I'm about 7 or 8 in the garden, digging, and I found a piece of patterned ceramic. Being a child I thought it was really cool and possibly an ancient relic, so I showed my whole family and put it in a box in the bottom of my wardrobe. Bedtime comes that night and dad comes in to tell me a story about a little girl who found an ancient relic in her garden. The story was about how the relic belonged to Hades, who came back across the river Styx to get it back. He tapped on her window slowly and just kept tapping. Eventually the little girl got up and opened her curtains and Hades was there, asking for it back. She refused, the fool, and he took the little girl to heck instead. Obviously there were more details and tension. Dad is a good storyteller. Night night lip, you sleep tight. And if I were you I'd put that pot back where you got it. Don't be silly dad. It's my treasure. I wasn't scared by that and I told him that too. So I'm lying there and I can hear this tapping noise. Very likely at first but then louder and louder. And I know my window is not near trees or accessible to people or anything. I'm lying in bed, convinced Hades is outside my window, but I'm too terrified to get the relic. I'm frozen with fear, don't want to call out or move in case Hades sees or hears me. The tapping is getting louder and more urgent now. I am seriously regretting ever digging anywhere. When I just hear my mum say, "What on earth are you doing, you silly old fool," from the hallway, and she brings my dad, who can't stop laughing, in to apologize, because he was leaning out of the window next to mine. No mean feat. He had to get nearly entirely out, tapping on my window with a stick with the sole intention of scaring me shitless. Nevertheless I still took my relic back to the garden and buried it the next day. When I was very little, like maybe less than 7, when my dad wanted to keep me busy he would tell me to go see if he was outside. My dad asked me to go see if my dad was outside, and I would go check. Also he was never there, which was disappointing. Maybe he was trying to tell you something. My mom told me the asterisk on the phone dialing pad was a snowflake and was used to call Santa to tell him when I was being naughty. Now that is brilliant. I played tuna with my parents. It involved the family tucking up in bed like tunas in a can. 3-year-old me fell asleep in minutes, and my parents got their nap. That's goddamn adorable. My mother told us that the cat hated the sound of the vacuum and it hurt poor Calico's ears. So when she would start the vacuum my brother and I would race the cat to our bedroom and cover her with blankets so she wouldn't have to hear that horrible noise. Poor cat loved us enough to never scratch us. Mum got us to clear out while she got the vacuuming done. We lived on a freaking farm miles from the nearest person and the cat spent most of her time outside, safely. It never occurred to us to just open the door. Since you and the cat both bolted together at the first sight of a vacuum, Calico probably thought she was protecting you too. When my family and I would be on long car trips, typically to Cape Cod, my dad would buy a pack of lifesavers and we would all play who could keep the lifesaver in one piece for the longest. It wasn't until about 5 years ago I realized he was just doing this so my sister and I would shut the heck up for a little bit. My sisters and I would stop all noise when we saw a police officer. Mum said we needed to be quiet or he would take us away. In cars, at school, in a hospital. Anytime I saw a cop, I became a son. Getting my first ticket was interesting. I want to hear about your first ticket. My mom told me that if I flipped the light switch on and off too fast often it would start to fire. I was terrified of accidentally causing this to happen. She does not remember telling me this. Not really manipulated. However, my father told me that horror movies were performed by actors and instructors who had planned what the scenes should look like. For some reason I misunderstood this. I thought that every time someone died in a horror movie, an actor would sacrifice his life. I actually thought this for a very long time, before I realized that this couldn't be true. My mother told my brothers and I that if we didn't shower we would grow crust. We never knew what crust was or where it formed. We didn't want to take a chance so we showered. As an adult I asked her what the F is crust. She looked straight at me and was like, "I lied just to get you guys to shower." My old babysitter told us if we spit in the bathtub we would grow mold on our feet. I'm guessing this was to prevent us spitting out water we got in our mouths. I seriously believed this until I was like 14. Until I just thought about it and realized how stupid it was. When my sister and I were little, whenever we really misbehaved, my parents would always say, "Stop that or we'll call the hospital and trade you in for better kids." One time, we decided to call their bluff and my dad picked up the phone and started dialing. We were good from then on. My dad told me he was going to trade me in for either a boy or a puppy. I cried like crazy and didn't want a dog until I understood he couldn't get rid of me. Oh man. My parents were the reigning champions of making up stories for us to believe. I genuinely thought the color orange was purple and vice versa for many years. I was told that if I didn't go to bed at 9 PM on Christmas Eve, Santa wouldn't come. Now I have to stay up to arrange the presents Christmas Eve because my 29-year-old sister refuses to stay up past 9. My mother told me that the dirtier a house was, the more likely it was to get robbed. So unless I wanted all my stuff to get stolen by bad men, I'd clean my room. My father convinced my sister and I that the grass on the lawn was lethal if it reached a certain length. That if it became mature enough, it would have the strength to grab feet and ankles, drawing its prey to the ground and consuming it. And that's why the lawnmower blades were made of metal. He used this to convince us to help him mow it. These are just a few. I'll try to think of more. My sister and I were told that haggis were creatures that ran around hills in Scotland. They have 3 legs and only run one way around the hill, so they have 2 long legs and 1 short leg. To catch them you just chase them around the hill the other way until they fall over. Told a variant of this to a friend of mine last year. Had her convinced for a few months that haggis were an endangered species, hence why you don't see it on menus outside of Scotland. She's 22. When I was a kid, I loved scrambled eggs but hated pepper. Let's face it, scrambled eggs taste better with pepper in them, so my parents always put pepper in everyone's eggs. When I would ask what the black flakes in my eggs were, my parents would say, just flakes coming off of the pan. Apparently crusty pan flakes are okay but pepper isn't. I believed them until I was about 9. If they used a cast iron pan, then it could actually be pan flakes. I love cast iron pans. My mom told me when I was a wee thing that I had to hold my breath when we drove by cemeteries because it was disrespectful to breathe when others couldn't. The last part I knew was bulls, but I still held my breath when I went by cemeteries. 2 weeks ago, she told me that she only made me do that because it was funny. When I was in 2nd grade, a 3rd grader on the bus used to tell me stories about a jar of magic crystals that he had at home. I believed every word and begged him to let me see them, but he would always make up some story about how his mom wouldn't let him bring them to school because they were too powerful. TLDR. Kids are really freaking stupid. In all reality, he was telling you about his parents' stash. When I was a little kid and needed my tonsils taken out, I got sent an anesthetic. It was allegedly bubblegum. I took one whiff of it and refused to keep the mask on. The anesthesiologist was extremely patient. He'd tell me I'd get ice cream after, and he put the mask on my stuffed cat and said, "Look, she likes it." I gave him a withering look and pointed out it was just a stuffed animal and couldn't actually smell it. The poor guy just sighed and said, "I'll make a bargain with you. If you keep the mask on for 10 seconds and you still don't like it, you don't have to wear it. We'll get you something else. Sounds fair?" Okay, ready? 1, 2. They told me it was bubblegum too. I said it stinks, I don't want to choose ZZZZZZ. When I was little, my parents told me that carrots were good for my eyes. True. And that the more I ate at dinner, the shinier my eyes got. I'd eat and eat, and they'd get up and put sunglasses on because of how bright my eyes were, in order to get me to finish my carrots. That's adorable. A story about my dumbness as a kid. My grandma told me that all of the tar on the road filling the cracks was moose slobber. We were driving through Canada at the time, so I thought it was legit. My dad said there were squashed snakes. He also said the yellow lines were to keep away lions. His proof of this was a lack of lions. I wanted my own phone line. This was the 90s, but my dad kept telling me we would talk about it later. Finally, I said okay, it's later. Let's talk about it, and he said if you bring it up one more time, it's never going to happen. So I never brought it up again. Frick. Growing up, nap time wasn't time for me to rest. Oh no. I was to help my mom take a nap by laying down with her, and the deal was then when I knew she was asleep I could get up and go play. Got me every time. Needless to say, if I tried to escape she would wake up and say I wasn't done helping yet. We had an old porcelain clawfoot bathtub with a narrow faucet. We figured out early how to push on the water and make a water fountain. Clearly mom didn't want us making a mess with the water, but for some reason told us that we would get trench mouth if we drank the water from the bathtub. To this day, I will not drink any water from the bathroom. I was probably 20 when my roommate asked me why I always went downstairs for toothbrushing water, and I told her I didn't want trench mouth. She stared at me until the light bulb went off. Damn it mom. Hahaha. I will go downstairs for water and have only drunk water from the bathroom once. No trench mouth fear, I just thought the water tasted better from the sink or fridge. Not me, but my brother used to listen to everything my mom said and paid attention to how she did things. When she was teaching us how to dress, she taught us to tuck in our shirts, even shirts, and wear our jeans mid-waist. I wore my clothes like this way too long, but eventually figured out that none of my friends wore their clothes like this, and now I dress like a normal person. My brother, however, is 30 years old and still dresses like mom taught him. My BF gets up in the morning, puts on his jeans, pulls on a t-shirt, tucks it into his jeans, pauses, untucks his shirt and carries on. This is semi-related, more just my dad fricking with me. I love my dad, but sometimes he was really freaking cruel with his jokes to me. I remember one day we were stuck in terrible traffic, Los Angeles, somebody playing at the Staples Center or something, and I guess he decided to frick with me a bit. I told him I had something stuck in my eye and he very nonchalantly told me that he'd just scoop out my eye and wash it out. He continued to explain and convince me for the next hour that people scooped out their eyes and cleaned them out every once in a while and that it was completely normal. He even went as far as to pretend to call my mom and have a conversation where she confirmed it was true. Eventually we stopped by a convenience store, and I started sobbing uncontrollably, being terrified of getting my eyes scooped out. That's when he finally broke it to me that there was no such thing as scooping your own eyes out to clean them. He's lucky you weren't the type to grab a spoon and do it yourself. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.